Welcome back. Let's now talk about the first class and higher order function here. So here let's now talk about a fundamental property of a JavaScript language, which is the fact that it has a first class functions and it enables us to write the higher order functions. But what's that all about? Well, let's see. So JavaScript is a language that has the first class function, which in technical terms means that functions are so-called first citizens. In practice, that means that functions are simply treated as values, and we are already touched on the idea a couple of times before, but this is an important feature of the language that is worth spending some more time talking about this. Now, why does JavaScript work this way? Well, it's simply because functions are really just another type of objects in JavaScript. Since objects are values, functions are values too. And since functions are values, there are a bunch of interesting things that we can do with them. So, like storing them into variables or object properties, and that of course we already did a couple of times before. So the function values here are marked in red, and then you see we created a function expression in the first example and an object method in the second example. So the value in the red rectangle is the function value itself, and that we can store wherever we like. We also can pass functions as arguments to other functions, and we actually already did that before when adding event listener or event handler to dump objects. So here we have the add listener function, and that you already know, and we clearly pass the greet function into add event list note function here as a value, right? And now to make it more interesting, we can also return a function from another function. That sounds kind of crazy, but it is very useful. Finally, remember that functions are objects, and many type of objects in JavaScript have methods, right? Like array method, for example. And actually, there are also function methods. So the methods that we can call on functions. So again, it sounds a bit crazy, right? But we'll see how to use this to our advantage throughout this section. And the blind method here is an example of that. And again, we'll learn about the blind method as we go through this session. All right. Now, in fact, JavaScript has the first class function, makes it possible for us to use and write. And this higher order function. So a higher order function is either a function that receives another function as an argument, or a function that returns a new function. So let's check out both types here. First, for function that receives another function, we have a sample example as before. The add event listener function is higher order function anyway. Well, because it receives another function as an input. Well, in this case, the greet function, and we usually say that the function that is passed in is a callback function. That's because the callback function will be called later by the higher order function. In this case, add event listener will call the greet callback later as soon as the click event happens. It's like the greet function saying, hey there, don't greet me yet, but call me back once you are ready. And this works not only in the context of the add event listener function, but in many other use cases as well. Okay, second, we have the function that returns another function. So we have higher order functions here. Basically, this whole code block which clearly returns a new function, which is this one, and this style of functions is also used a lot in JavaScript, but it's also more advanced and I guess harder to understand. I'll show it to you in the next lecture, but we'll explore this deeper a bit. Now, just to finish, there seems to be a confusion between the first class function and the higher order functions. Some people think that they are the same thing, but actually they mean different things. So the first class function is a feature that programming language either has or does not have. All it means is that all function values, okay, and there is no first class function in practice, okay, it's just a concept. They are, however, higher order functions in practice, which are possible because the language supports the first class function. It's a subtle difference. Now, in the next lecture, let's create our own higher order function. So see you there. Thank you.